So good afternoon, dear friends, dear participants. I'm very delighted to have a renowned authority on research methodology from Poland, Professor Anna Wojciuk. Today, she has joined with us. We are so grateful to you for accepting our humble invitation and to address this workshop session on research and publication. So on behalf of the Forum for Global Studies, I extend my warm welcome to you, Professor Anna Wojciuk. And I also welcome to all the participants who joined with us, FGS. So I would like to, I don't take much more time because we have only 1 hour. So I would like to invite Professor Anna Wojciuk to take the floor and proceed the session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your warm introduction, for the invitation. And just since we are on the Zoom and you only see my head, I wanted to repeat what I said before the beginning to Dr. Tripathi, that when I will be doing this, it means I agree, because in Poland, in Europe, we do this way. So because normally when we meet in person, it's not that important because you see my entire body. But if you see my head constantly disapproving, then you may be confused. So please understand it as me being in line with what you say. So I listened to your lecture yesterday, which was very rich, very detailed. You learned a lot of concepts, and I think it was great. And I would like to give you, I would like to go further, but also to give you as much practical advice as I have concerning how to cook this dish. I like this metaphor of the professor who was teaching yesterday, that it's like cooking the dish methodology. I also like another metaphor, which is like designing a house. To design a research is like designing a house, and you need to have a foundation, and you need to have an idea how this house will look like. Yes, it's not a good approach. Then you start building, and then it occurs what you will, where you will end. You should more or less know at the beginning where you will end. What is your purpose? You should know it at the beginning. And I think yesterday you learned a lot about how to start this whole enterprise. But I would like to stress from what is the crucial thing from my perspective and from my experience. So guys, I couldn't stress more that research question is it's the foundation. It's the foundation of your house. You must develop a good research question, because only then you can build a solid building. Yes, if your foundation is rotten, if your foundation is weak, the whole building will collapse, no matter how much marble and gold you will put in this house. So it is very, very good. Thank you that you are joining with cameras. It's very nice for me to see your faces. So if you can do it, I know you can have limitations in terms of data transfer, but if only you can join with your cameras, I will be very grateful. So you should focus a lot on this foundation of your house. So this is the research question. And I would like to share with you, because I am teaching a lot of students methodology at the University of Warsaw, and I will give you some practical guidance, what errors to avoid while developing your research question. So first of all, if you are writing about international relations, make sure that your research question is about international relations, because sometimes students think, and young researchers think, that if they write about a different country, then let's say Poland, let's say they write about India domestic politics, they think it's international relations because India is a foreign country. It's not, yes, because it's your domestic politics. So if you are in IR, make sure your question is about interactions of different countries or international institutions, yes, or interactions of actors within the country with international institutions. There can be a lot of versions of this thing. But don't, if you in India develop a research about Polish party system, this is not international relations, yes? So this is the first thing. Second thing, don't ask a question about the future. Yes, because as our colleague yesterday said, your hypothesis, your question has to be verifiable, testable. And if you ask about the future, future doesn't exist yet. So you cannot test if your prediction about the future so basically we develop research about the past. It can be recent past. Yes, it can be, let's say, annexation of Donetsk and Lugansk 2 days ago, but it is already a past. However, if you are writing a dissertation, let's say, or a paper about something in the future, which hasn't happened before this paper is published or you are submitting, this is not testifiable. So don't ask about the future. And third thing, don't ask a question which is a modal question. Can, could, should, would, and so on. Yes, don't ask those questions because it's impossible to say if something could happen or couldn't happen. I know that yesterday Karl Popper was mentioned, a great philosopher. The other philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenstein, said that everything he could think about is possible. So how you can say if Poland could become a great power? Well, perhaps it could, but it's very unlikely. Yes, so it's not a good research question. Don't ask model questions. And among those research questions, there are three types. There are what questions, how questions, and why questions. What question is a descriptive question. It asks you to describe what exists. This is a least ambitious question. So typically in research, we don't like very much those descriptive questions. The best questions are why questions and how questions. And why questions include all the questions about the impact. So for example, what is the impact of the ruling party in a given country on the policy of this country? Yeah, so does it matter if in India BJP or the Congress party is in power for foreign policy? Yes, so this is a causal question, and yesterday it was covered broadly that you want causal questions. So this is a good question on impact, causal question, or how question about the mechanisms. Okay, so how things happen. You want to understand processes which led to certain developments. So basically, to make a long story short, good research questions are analytical questions rather than descriptive questions. Why? Because most facts are known. You can find them in newspapers. You can find in documents. There is not big value added if you have a descriptive questions, unless there is also a caveat here, and I will cover it. So, so this is crucial to have a good foundation for your house. If you have it, then you are on a good way to build a very efficient study. How to? So now you know that you should look for analytical questions, and which are either causal or how questions about mechanisms, processes. So how to develop this question? So the very important thing, and it was mentioned yesterday, but I would stress it even more, what is very important is literature review. You have to know what was said about a given topic. Because being a researcher, your duty is to contribute. Yes, your duty is to make a contribution. And how can you say if you're making a contribution or not if you don't know what has been said? Yes, so first of all, you have to establish what has been said about a given topic, and you have to identify key answers to your research question. Yes, because if you, let's stay with this question which I mentioned, how the ruling, what is the impact of the ideology of the party in government for foreign policy? Yes, this is a clearly IR question. And there will be, if you go through literature, you will find a number of answers. To make a long story short, realists will tell you that it doesn't matter, especially structural realists. Yes, they will give you an answer that it doesn't matter. And you should, in your literature review, you should cover it. Yes, that there is a group of scholars who say that it doesn't matter. And then there are other groups of scholars who believe it matters, and it matters greatly. Liberals, constructivists, all those groups will tell that it matters. And in your literature review, you should say that, let's say liberals, they say that it matters and why it matters. And you should bring names of those scholars who made important claims about how this mechanism works. And once you have in your process, yes, you found your research question, and it's the $1 million question, how to find a good research question. Yes, and there are a number of advices how to do that. Most scholars think about it in terms of puzzles. Yes, that there is something which is surprising. Yes, which is not obvious, which is irregular, that is going on. Yes, and from this kind of puzzle, that there is something you find curious and you say, God, I know a lot about IR, but this is weird. This is a great hook to develop a research question. Yes, so I would like to share with you, oh, can I get this possibility of sharing my screen? So I'd like to share with you my own research and to show you how it worked for me and to illustrate how the puzzle could look like, yes, in order to give you a better
Dr. Amna, are you here?
Yes, 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 but I can't, still can't share.
1 minute. Dr. Amna, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
No. Dr. Amna Mirza.
Doctor, yes, I can see, Doctor.
She is the host of the program. So she can give the right to share.
Okay, so I will continue. So maybe I will go back when you allow me to share, okay?
Okay.
To that, but I definitely, I would like to share. I think it's helpful. So once you find this puzzle, there is a yesterday. It's really would like to share with you this point.
Madam, you were talking about the research question, that is the $1 million question.
Yes. But I wanted to show you some.
Yeah, you want to share your own research work, but that due to the unavailability of this Dr. Amna is not possible right now. So you may carry on.
Dr. Amna, are you here? Okay, Professor Anna Wojciuk, you can continue later on.
Okay, I will. Okay, so I will. So we will go back to this research question because it's important to show it, I think, very clearly. So once you have this research question, and you know from the literature review what has been said about this topic, you should formulate the hypothesis. Yes, so let's say we have this question about the impact of ideology of the party in government on foreign policy, and you should formulate hypothesis defining what, according to you, is this impact of the ideology of party in government on foreign policy. Yes, so let's say I am having a project on populists in power and their foreign policies. So let's say that I make a hypothesis that the populists in power, they impact foreign policy of a country and make it more reckless, yes, and make it imprudent. I say that foreign policy of populists in power tends to be
sorry
less...
to interrupt you. Sorry
yes?
to interrupt you. Dr. Amna is here. Ma'am, just please
Yes.
allow. Ma'am, just
Yes.
please allow to Professor Anna Wojciuk to kindly share her PPT.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Allow. Now you are the host, so you have a right to allow.
Yeah. So, Anna ma'am, you can share if you want. I can, because
I can't share.
Sir, because I'm logging in from my handset. So,
Okay. You make me host. I will do it.
just one.
Sorry for disturbance. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
And now you can make me the host.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, you may continue. I'm doing this. You may continue. Okay. Professor Anna, you may continue.
So,
yes.
Okay. So once you have this hypothesis, what is important? The hypothesis has to combine, first of all, the thing you found puzzling, yes, something which should be studied, yes, because what is very important, you shouldn't study things which already are very well known, yes. Of course, you can study things which are very well known, but then you should think what will be your contribution. And there are a number of rules to make to allow you to have this contribution. So first, you can study the same topic which other scholars studied, but you develop a new theory. Yes, so you provide new explanation as to why certain things happen. Yes, so this is your first thing. Maybe someone else studied this issue, but you provide new theory. Second, important, you provide new method. So you're studying the same topic which already was studied by other scholars, but you do it with a new method. This is the second thing. Third thing, you have new data. So people studied certain things, but let's say you have access to an archive, or you have access to certain data which other scholars didn't have access to. This is justifying your studying this topic, because then you can make a contribution. And the third thing is the new analysis. Maybe other people have studied, but you have an idea how to develop an entirely new analysis of the same issue. So there are four traditional criteria for this contribution. First is new theory, new method, new data, new analysis. So when you find this hook, yes, for your research question, something new which you want to cover, you have to also find out what other scholars said about that, and then while developing your research question, make sure that you can have this contribution, that you can provide something new in this topic. This is really the core of research. Good researchers, they are trained and they are very good in being able to find those gaps, because otherwise it's hard to publish such a research in good journal, because the reviewers will immediately tell you that this thing is already covered, there is nothing new. So I couldn't stress more. You should think about your research in terms of, firstly, research question, and secondly, contribution, which you will make, okay? Rajendra has a question. No.
Yeah, you may continue. Question session, we will take it after the lecture.
Yes, I agree. However, I am also happy to interact and answer immediately, because sometimes it's easier to answer immediately.
Okay, sure.
So once you have the thing which you find puzzling, and you know that what other people answer to this question, you produce this hypothesis, yes, which is, hypothesis is a kind of model of your answer. So you say, okay, I will build this kind of building in my research. My idea about what is the impact of ideology of a party on foreign policy goes, yes, that first of all, they are less prudent in foreign policy. So this is my hypothesis. And second, they are, since populist ideology is very reluctant towards the elites, in their policy practices, they will tend to rely less on experts or career diplomats and so on. Yes, so I developed a hypothesis. Actually, there are two hypotheses. First, about the behavior of a state, that it will be less prudent, because generally populism is the ideology of no constraints. Yes, so populist policy generally is much less. Okay, I am now the host. Very good. Thank you so much.
Now you are in a position and to share your PPT.
Yes, I am doing it immediately, guys. Okay, so this is my study, published recently in Oxford University Press. And this is a historical analysis of China in 19th century. And here I wanted to show you, because the crucial thing is this puzzle, how to find this puzzle, yes? And what was the puzzle I found here? So as you probably are familiar with realism, and especially structural realism, which is a dominant theory of security, and explaining behavior of states in terms of security issues in international relations. So the key claim of realism is that states balancing occurs. Yes, so when there is a power of one country growing, other countries will balance. Yes, like now China is rising, India is balancing. Yes, so this is the pure fundamental claim of realism. And while studying China in 19th century, what was puzzling to me, that Western powers changed a lot.
Sorry to interrupt you, Professor Anna.
Yes.
Can you admit the participants, they were waiting room? So if you once
I tried to admit. Yeah. I admitted some of them, but I don't see new people coming. There was one person and I admitted immediately, but I see no other waiting. When I see people waiting, I will admit immediately.
Thank you.
I know it because I am working with the same software with my students, so I will for sure let them in.
Thank you.
Okay, so so what I identified, which was puzzling to me, is that in 19th century, Western powers were very aggressive towards China, starting from Opium Wars in 1840s, and China did not react for 60 years. This looks like a good puzzle, yes, good empirical puzzle. You have this question, why? Why in hell a country would allow other countries to balance, to shift this balance of power in such a disadvantage of China? Yes, so this was my research question, yes, and I asked two research questions, yes. Why did China not balance against the serious threats it faced between 1840s and 1900s? And I have a second research question. Why did China change its approach and start to balance around 1900? Yes, so I have two research questions. Not always you need to have a hypothesis. Hypothesis is not necessary. While in quantitative research, you almost always have hypotheses. In qualitative research, and I was asked here to cover qualitative research, it's not always necessary to have a hypothesis. In this paper, I don't have a hypothesis. Let's say I have it, but I'm not using it. Yes. So what is my hypothesis, if you like? I'm not writing about it explicitly, but there is a hypothesis. It's in the introduction. Yes, that actually China. Okay, I'm admitting that China used different ideational structures in order to understand security situation of China. This is my hypothesis. So the hypothesis is actually that the ideas of decision makers matter for their behavior in international relations. This is my hypothesis. And then the entire, in your introduction, you are supposed to show the puzzle. If we think about research in terms of ready paper, yes? In your introduction, you need to show the puzzle. So here, yes, I develop the description of what was going on, all these threatening things going on, and China doing almost nothing to react. And I write why it's so puzzling, why it's so weird. And I also briefly refer to realism and say that this dominant theory on security is predicting completely different behavior of a country than something that really happened. Yes, and I ask, and I show that my answer is at odds with dominant theories. This is my contribution. Yes, so when you are developing another person, when you are developing a research, you could also think about it in terms of discussion with other scholars. You should think of other scholars as your colleagues who are very knowledgeable about some topic, and your research is like trying to take part in a conversation. Person X says something, person Y says something, person Z says something about a given topic. And you join this conversation and say, hey, in my view, it worked like that. This is the mechanism. This is the reason. This is the explanation. Yes, so it's this contribution is not something magical. It's not magic. It's just when you think about research as conversation of scholars all over the world, your contribution is that you have something new to add. And don't be shy, yes? Because you don't need to have a big contribution. You don't have to add huge new thing, because it's very hard. Even great research in great journals, sometimes their contribution is quite small, because there's so much has been written about all topics. So you shouldn't focus that you don't have like big thing like Hans Morgenthau. Yes, no, this is not the point. You should have even as you could have even a small contribution, like new method, yes, new data. You can show something small, but you should add something. This is fundamental for developing a good research, yes. And then here, yes, this is how I have done it, yes. Theory, ideational structures and balancing, yes. So this is my discussion, this is my literature review roughly, yes. I say what scholars have said about the mechanisms of balancing. And I claim in this paper that what they said about balancing is insufficient to explain the curious behavior of China in 19th century. That actually China's behavior is at odds with the major theories of IR. And so this is the literature review, yes. And since you are as a young researcher, and not necessarily only young, all researchers, same rule applies for everyone. If you go to best journals, they all papers have literature review, yes. So the scholars, they have to be able to identify the debate in which they take part. You don't need to cover everything what was said about a given topic, but you need to identify a key debate in which you would like to take part. So you should name people with whom you are discussing. This is the purpose of your literature review. You can also use different terms to better imagine. You define your audience. Yes, you define your audience, because to give you a practical advice, don't try to write for everybody, because if you write for everybody will be unsatisfied with your research. You should define the audience. So, like, what community of scholars do you write to? The community of scholars who study security? Do you write to the community which studies institutions, which studies norms, which studies practices? Are you addressing it to realists? Are you addressing it to liberals? Are you addressing it to constructivists? You can define it differently, this audience. But the better you define it, the better for your research. Because first of all, you will be able to be very knowledgeable about what this community said about a given problem, and therefore define your contribution. And secondly, if those people get your paper to review, they are very likely to find it interesting. But for example, if you let's say you have a paper which is using international relations, economics, and sociology, and you combine those different literature, you read a lot, you feel you are very broadly read, and that you know so much about this topic, and you publish a paper which is you feel will be interesting for economists, for sociologists, and for IR people. This will not happen unless you're a person like Daron Acemoglu or Putnam. But there are very few people in history who managed to speak to audiences in different disciplines. So it's better, and especially in the beginning, it's much better, much more practical to define a narrower audience, but to define it very clearly. Yes, you are recording some music, and it's for let's say it's for teenagers. Yes, so you don't promote it among pensioners. Yes, this is very important in research, believe me, because and also when you are writing a paper you should think about the journal where you will admit it, because this is also the audience. Where you will submit this journal is very clearly connected with this audience. This is how you should identify it. So the audience should be addressed in your paper, and you should think in terms of where you will publish it, and address it early on, rather than developing an ideal paper and then trying to put it into some journal. Because the problem is that the journal may be unsatisfied with your paper because it doesn't fit into the debates they are covering. So the best thing is to know 3-4 journals where you could submit it quite early on.